Norsca is one of the best DLCs in Total War's history in my opinion, and the frustration that came alongside those delays going into Game 2 notwithstanding, I think most of us were very excited to see how they'd match up against the other races of mortal empires, and War Mammoths, those frosty blue-eyed pachyderms from the far north, were a big part of that. But when they finally launched alongside the Queen and the Crone, Mumakil weren't exactly what we remembered from Game 1. Their stats had gone up, on paper they seemed like they'd be amazing, but their performance just never seemed to be up to par. Why? Well, a big reason for that was that they had lost their collision attacks, a mechanic that inflicts damage as a chariot or a cauldron or a big furry elephant pulls through a unit. In theory, they were still good in a prolonged fight against infantry, but when a mammoth is just sitting there in combat, it's a missile magnet, and it dies. But the new patch just gave them their impact and collision damage back, and the Crusher of Souls now functions more like a huge, devastating chariot meant to plow through formations and keep on chugging, and it feels good to see them return to the battlefields of Total War. But if there's one thing the Dawi are good at, it's killing big monsters. I'm not sure any other race in Mortal Empires has so many tools for doing so. We know lizard people will often leave their dinosaurs at home when they're fighting against the dwarfs because thunderers, trollhammer torpedoes, cannons, and giant slayers are such a big threat for them, but the question is, can they do the same thing to a mammoth with 45% damage negation every 2 minutes? Ungrim Ironfist will do his best to answer that question, but it's a bit hard to take him seriously when he's ruining my cinematic shots with that god-awful clipping from the Dragon Cloak of Fiskar. Dude is actually gouging his own eyeballs out with that Dragon Cloak. Pretty edgy stuff, and the dwarfs are in some ways kind of a tough matchup for Norsca, I think. They've got the firepower to take down the big stuff, and blasting charges from Ironbreakers and Miners absolutely wreck your infantry. So, working in a lot of chariot play and going very wide is typically the way to go. Cannons will get things popping off and bisect a few unfortunate Marauder champions across the desert sands, and that is where we will find ourselves now. Stout-hearted dwarfs holding the line as a howling warband with chariots and mammoth support close in for the kill. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Marauder champions with great weapons. They're pretty expensive for what they do, but they're your best option for the main line fight as Norsca when you're up against Dawi, because Berserkers just won't cut it. But the Hunters have a really important role to play as AP shield-breaking missile troops. They are incredibly susceptible to Quarreler or Thunderer fire, but if they're given time to throw their axes, they can severely mess up stuff for the Dawi. On the flank opposite Wulfrik, a Shaman of the Lore of Death, Purple Sun, and Soulblight for debuffing enemy battle formations and dropping juicy vortexes, and that chariot will of course be super annoying for the dwarfs to deal with, and a Marauder Ice Wolf chariot all the way out on the right flank for frostbite attacks and a bonus for infantry. So with Wulfrik and Soulcrusher, that is the Norscan build, and for the dwarfs, a lot of miners with blasting charges and longbeards on the flanks, Quarrelers in the back, Giant Slayer, Cannon, a Dwarf, Runesmith, and a bunch of Ironbreakers, 2 of them in fact, and all those blasting charges are going to be really annoying for the Norscans to deal with because they will shred all that low armor infantry. And if you ever had doubts about the nimble footwork of a mammoth, may this replay dispel that notion once and for all, busting out the Saturday Night Fever dance moves, dodging cannonballs like it's the Matrix, and we'll pull him back for now because you really don't want a 2,500 gold unit taking a lot of shots before it charges into melee, and a great cannon or a dwarf cannon will really put the hurt on him bad. Now, the geometry for the dwarf deployment here is a little bit shallow. Typically, you'll see a deeper formation, especially if you have thunderers. You want there to be gaps between your front and your back line so that slayers can kind of move where they need to and thunderers can get that enfilade fire going in there. But it's going to work out pretty well here because he only has 1 slayer and the runesmith to cover everything. So the more stuff is kind of compact and around that runesmith, the more he'll be able to get under that buff and the easier he'll be able to traverse with the giant slayers in the back lines and cover both flanks. But he might look to spread out as the battle lines start to break down. So the blasting charges are obviously going to be the big threat early on, and there are a couple ways you can try to mitigate their damage output, and one of them is to charge into the flanks of those miners with the chariots, or maybe cause them to move with Sea Fang, unleashing that wind spell into the flank of some dwarf warriors, and then charging directly into the flank of the miners with Wulfrik on that chariot, that bonus versus infantry, and that AP, both incredibly good. Single entity chariots in general, whether it be nobles for the high elves or the shaman sorcerer, are just going to be really good against the Dawi. They're really hard for the dwarves to shut down, but those blasting charges are going to punish the main infantry approach for the Norscans so bad, and can't tie them all down, right? Some of them are just going to have to suck it up and enjoy those explosions as they charge into melee. Wulfrik is going to be a terror in the night, though. He's going to keep moving wherever he needs to and just keep charging over and over again. But the Mammoth comes in now, and it will be glorious as the Pachyderm makes contact. Second attack, they can get 2 attacks off right away, and then more collision attacks as they charge through, just demolishing that front line, and immediately keep it moving, use it like a chariot, and go into the next formation. And another swipe of those tusks will just paint the sand red, and it will be super fun to see this thing go to work in this battle. But when you see a huge unit like that, it's kind of the Theoden effect from Pelennor Fields and Return of the King. Everyone, doesn't matter who you're playing, it's just gonna have alarm bells ringing in their head telling them to bring it down, bring it down, bring it down, and that means cannon and missile fire will be focusing it down for the majority of the game. Marauder Hunters got too far up there, took a blasting charge volley to the dome. Half of them, more than half, are already dead. Brutal stuff, and really good use of those Iron Breakers, but Wulfrik and the Death Sorcerer will look to avenge them, and they've already gotten some amazing charges down the length of those spaghetti lines, which is exactly how you want to use chariots. Enrage has popped on the Soulcrusher here, charging into the flank of the Miners and then causing a terror rout, and that 45% damage negation is going to be so important because right now, half the Dawi army is trying to kill the Mammoth and bring it down, with Giant Slayers chasing after it, a bunch of the Quarrelers firing in, the cannon still online, which is a big deal that really needs to get shut down ASAP. Soulblight is down in the center, which will mitigate the damage output of everything else there in the center, but still, really scary for the Mammoth, and even with Enrage popped, it is already down to half HP. It's done a lot of damage, but it's taking a lot of fire too. So needs to keep moving, needs to keep being used like a chariot and charging through these units. Never stop, because if you do, it's bad news bears. The Marauder Icewolf Chariot going right through the Quarrelers there. A Sea Fang, not a very good one actually. Kind of missed the, might have been a misclick. Missed the Longbeards, which would have been really useful in that fight. Maybe turned it more in the Great Weapon's favor. But here in the center, I mean, the entire battle lines have already collapsed in on each other. It is bedlam. It is mayhem back here, and the Slayers are trying their best to prevent that Mammoth from shutting down the cannon. He is on top of the artillery crew right now, but with the Slayers nearby and Ungrim, it's scary. It is very scary for the Mammoth, and there's not a lot of HP left on it. It's dropping like crazy. Needs to get out and get some support, because if Ungrim gets his hands on him, it's only going to be like 3 or 4 attacks, and if he pops Red Ruin for that 60% weapon damage and AP damage buff, I mean, that Mammoth will literally drop almost instantly. So he's going to pull out and go for the Quarrelers here. There is a nice charge coming in right now, and can you imagine seeing that thing come at you? But the second attack on that collision will miss. Remember that melee attack still plays a part here, and even though it is a huge Mammoth with good stats, it can still miss its attacks. It will make up for it with a nice rear charge and Crimson fountaining into the desert sands. Wow, look at that. That is so hype. That is what makes a Mammoth, dude. Very few units in the game can actually put out that kind of damage output that quickly, and almost shattering that unit right off the rear charge. Miners still doing what they can, but they are out of their blessing charges now, and it's going to be up to Wulfrik and the Shaman Sorcerer and the Chariots to the left to really do the damage here, because the infantry did not have a good time on the way in. Not even close. Had a really bad time with all those explosives going off. Frontline got absolutely shish kebabbed on the way in, but Wulfrik is still fine. And, I mean, his mobility and his armor piercing and his stat line on that chariot are going to be too much for the dwarfs back here, and chopping off some heads as he goes. That's what Wulfrik is all about. He even carries one on his shield, flayed skin and decapitated head alike. It's one of the most brutal things I've seen in this game. I can't even believe it's in a rated T game. Look at his model when you get the chance. Pretty nasty stuff, but pretty fitting for the Soul Hunter. Coincidence that he's hunting for souls when he's a ginger? I think not, but speaking of souls, oh my god. The Soulcrusher, bowling stuff over, goring the stunties, but taking cannonballs and Quarreler fire to the flank, and on its last legs, on the verge of breaking, but one final stampede into the teeth of the Dawi defense, shattering their resolve where he can, but that might be the Soulcrusher's last action because it will break, and Wulfrik, not happy about it. Soulblight going down in the middle of everything, and the Chariot still running roughshod in the back here. But the infantry for the Norskins is gone. Balance bar shifting a little bit in the Dwarfs' favor as the Mammoth runs away, hoping that that thing will come back, because all that AP and bonus versus infantry will be incredibly useful if we get into a late game situation, especially with that terror too. Longbeards, of course, immune to Psych, but a lot of the units still around are not, and a nice charge into the flank by that Shaman Sorcerer. And back here, the Mammoth, as it runs away, throwing some jabs, and a Slayer will get his deserved end. Take a couple javelins to the big pot belly there, and drop into the sands as the 3 of his buddies try to chase after and get into the Mammoth and make sure it doesn't come back. Still breaking, not shattered yet, but the Giant Slayers will not be able to close the gap there. And unfortunately, because he's being chased, it's not rallying. And that means the Shaman Sorcerer needs to come all the way back and kill those Dwarf Slayers. The Marauder Champions and Marauders, not fast enough to catch up to them. And when there's that small a gap in between a routing unit and a chasing unit, that means that the unit won't rally sometimes. And so killing those 2 Giant Slayers actually going to be very important here. And we're getting pretty close to the white line, to the edge of the map. And if the Mammoth is gone, the chances of Norsca pulling this game out are going to be a lot harder. Not impossible, not by any means, but it will definitely be harder. And so, as the Giant Slayers do get run over there, they'll get the bad touch from behind, but looks like they might, yeah, they're still around. All right, 1 model went down there, but it's the white line, and Soulcrusher's gone. Say goodbye to the Mammoth, and that sucks. I was pretty sad about that, honestly. I was like, why are you not coming back? Can you please come back and rally to the rest of my men? He won't. He is gone now, and the Soulcrusher will save his own skin. Don't blame him. It's just an elephant at the end of the day, and he wants to live, and I don't really blame him there. But that means Wulfrik, 1 chariot left of the Marauder Ice Wolves, the Shaman Sorcerer, and a few Marauders here or there are going to be all that is left to take on the Dawi defense. And quite the defense it is. I mean, they don't have a lot left, but there's still some units there. Ironbreakers, Longbeards, some Dwarf Warriors, and Ungrim is full HP. And killing Ungrim will probably be the biggest issue. The cannon's about to open up fire now, and as they wheel up, they will go directly for the Sorcerer, who has no health left, and it's going to be 1 cannonball, and that is all it takes, and it goes down. And I was very sad about that, because I was in the middle of casting Purple Son of Xarius to kind of break up that formation and allow Wulfrik to really get in there, shoot the gaps, and start going Gladiator on some dwarf butts, chopping off limbs with those side chariots, which reminds me of Russell Crowe. It's actually, today is the 15th anniversary of Master and Commander. Amazing movie. Go watch it if you've never seen it before. It's so good. Really just underrated, incredibly underrated movie, and one of my favorites of all time. But Wulfrik now on his chariot into the flank of the dwarves here, and he's gonna have a field day, right? They don't have a whole lot that can stop him. The Giant Slayers are gone now, thanks to the Soulcrusher being a beast. I think it got like 90 kills, something like that, but killed a lot of Giant Slayers too, even though those Mohawk men were haunting him the entire time. And now Wulfrik is in there and just having a blast. He's having the time of his life, pulling through. And remember those collision attacks, the attacks from his Sword of Torvald, and his continuous cycle charging will really allow him to rack up an absurd amount of kills in a really short time. And Ungrim's trying to shut him down, but he's, at the end of the day, he's on foot and he can't catch up to him. But the rest of the Norscan army is like, Wulfrik, we love you, buddy, but we don't really want to help you out right now, because if we do, we're going to die. They're going to shatter, and it's pretty much going to be army losses here at the end of the game. Wulfrik will charge in one more time, and I'm going to give up and say, you can't do enough. You can't beat Ungrim. I could kill the entire army here, and I still would not have the ability to kill Ungrim, so, I mean, with Red Ruin and with all his armor-piercing death blow and all that crap, like, Ungrim would just get, or Wulfrik would just get beaten into the sands and have no chance. So we're gonna let him kind of get chopped up a bit. He'll run away, and that will be the game. A valiant defeat. So Gojira will take it and defeat me with his dwarfs, and he played that very well. I think the Ironbreakers were something I was not expecting at all, and those blasting charges really hurt bad. They really hurt my front line, and that cannon was actually online for a lot of the battle, which was a big mistake on my part. Should have gotten one of my Marauders around the flank with the sole purpose of getting at those Giant Slayers and the artillery crew, because chariots aren't very good at displacing cannon crews, and even though I did charge them a couple times, it didn't actually get them off the cannon, and so they got a bunch of point-blank volleys into Soulcrusher, so he didn't do quite as much there as I would have liked. I've actually had quite a bit of success with the Mammoth since the patch, but at the end of the day, it's one of those units that tends to either stomp the yard and just completely carry the game, or it gets tracked before it ever has a chance to do a whole lot. And I try to avoid posting pub stomps whenever I can. So even though I probably have more than 10 replays of Mammoths just getting like over 150 kills and pancaking everything, I didn't really feel like showing them, because when someone does absolutely nothing to counter a unit or just brings the wrong build, it doesn't necessarily make for the most exciting replay. But don't let the fact that I lost here fool you. Mammoths are in a better spot right now. They can crush armies in the right situation, and Soulcrusher didn't do a bad job at all, considering how much firepower was getting thrown his way. But Gojira did a really good job of minimizing his impact and keeping that cannon online, and those Giant Slayers and Ungrim chasing him around kind of put him in the ground a little bit earlier than he would like to be, and they just made sure that he did not have free reign in the battlefield. So a really nice build from Gojira. I liked his geometry, I liked his play there. He definitely layered his defense pretty well, even though it wasn't typically what you might see from a Dawi build. It worked out pretty nicely and covered the Mammoth very well. So hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Peace out.